Thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the Education Partnership. Thank you so much for braving the elements and getting here today. We have a great show in store. So my name is Josh Whiteside. I am the Executive Director of this wonderful organization, the Education Partnership, where today we are proud to play backdrop for this year's Report to the Community. Now, for the past 17 years, the Education Partnership has stood as a bridge between the community at large and many, many schools in southwestern Pennsylvania as a way for the community to provide direct, tangible supports to so many students and teachers throughout the region. It's everything from pencils and crayons to snacks and shampoo to books and furniture and everything in between for free. And if there's one thing I've learned throughout this, it's that partnership is the operative word in our name. It's partnership with foundations, corporations, nonprofits, schools that make all of this possible and creates real opportunity for a more meaningful, robust, and dare I say, fun education for so many in the community. And I think it's this caring partnership that makes Pittsburgh. I think we can credit Fred Rogers with at least some of that mentality, which I think now just runs freely through our rivers. And today I'm really grateful to welcome our friends and neighbors and partners in A+ schools and Pittsburgh Public Schools to be here for today's event. Together as a community, we recognize and embrace the role that we all play in improving education. It is my pleasure to now introduce someone who I've seemingly known for most of my life, and someone who knew Fred Rogers for much of his. A trusted neighbor in every sense of the word, former president and CEO of the Fred Rogers Company, and today acting as, in his capacity as current board member of A+ Schools, Bill Eisler.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you and to your staff for all the preparations to make today possible. Those who were up most of the night, setting up, clearing the parking lot, getting things going. Looking at the smiling superintendent of schools, never easy on a snow day. And you've been at this for well over 30 years, so you know what it's like on a day like today to get people going. But before I officially begin, I want to take time not only to thank the staff for the educational partnership, but the staff at A+ schools, because they work tirelessly. I know that as a board member, to get information to the public, to those of us who are really committed and interested in public education, to inform us of what's going on in our schools. I'm glad everybody could make it in the snow. I'm glad those of you who are home and warm and enjoying a hot cup of coffee or hot cocoa. You're going to hear from James Fogarty, as we have heard from James for many years, about what's going on in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. This is the 21st year that this report has been given to the community. And I say given to the community because it is a gift. I know a lot of people who, when they are ready to think about school for their children, read the report, look at the schools, look at the good things that are going on. Critical report has data analysis. It has a lot of bright spots, brings out problems and issues, but it's here to inform our community's parents, leaders, funders, and community partners. We're with one today, which is an impartial and independent view of what is happening in our schools. Public education is very important to the future of this country. We have teachers and administrators who every day are doing their best to help children become productive adults and lifelong learners. In Pittsburgh, we all know that the skills, knowledge, and opportunities that can help our children live out their lives to the fullest potential really begins in our classrooms. More than ever, the work of our public schools is important, as I have said, for the future of this country. We also have the responsibility to let people know how good we are doing, and how we can do more. So with that in mind, I thank you all, for those in attendance here in person and those at home, for being interested enough to take time out of your day to join us to hear this year's report to the community. And with that, James Fogarty, the tireless, never-ending director, we give you the report.
Thanks. Right. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here, both online and in person. Want to walk through today's agenda, and then what we'll do is go through what's in the report, talk a little bit about some challenges and bright spots in Pittsburgh Public School data, talk about how this community is showing up for Pittsburgh Public Schools children and families. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from a principal who opened up her school to allow us in and learn more about how Pittsburgh Concord Pre-K to 5 is working with these great families, immigrant and refugee families that are in our communities, to serve them well and to learn with them in a community of global learners. And then have some reflections from Dr. Walters and Billy Hileman of the PFT, and then we'll close out. All hearts and minds aligned. We ready to go? All right. So what's inside this report? Every year we put this out. And I just want to remind people what you're getting when you get this. If you are a Pittsburgh Public School family, in partnership with Pittsburgh Public Schools, we send this out to every single PPS family in the district. So that's over 14,000 households. In addition, this goes out to every Carnegie Library. It goes out to our friends in the magisterial justice offices. It goes out to your state legislator and to city council people. And it goes out to the funding community. It also goes out to all of our partners in the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative. And you can find it today on ourschoolspittsburgh.org. And so we want to make sure that you know where to find it, where you can get it. And if you need copies, always feel free to reach out to us. Part of what we try and do is provide an executive summary. So today's presentation is really a summation of that executive summary, where we try and identify some trends, do some systems analysis, but also provide things like CTE taking and how many students are earning credits or certifications through CTE, and other additional data. In addition, we have our Rising Up story, which really focuses on Concord, but focuses more broadly on English language development and learning in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And in that story, our goal is to really talk about the growth of English language learners in the district, because it is a population that is the fastest growing in our district, and their contributions to our school communities. Including this year, we also have some great community resources with contact information, academic growth, the PBOS data from 2024, which was the latest data we could get at the time we went to print. If you go to the state's website for PBOS, you might be able to get 2025 data either today or within the next week. But by the time we go to print, we were only able to put in 2024 data. And then we have a whole section related to school partnerships. So we have a very robust partnership with Everyday Labs, which is providing nudge letters and texts to families all across PPS. We've launched a pilot with the Pittsburgh Steelers called Stay in the Game. I'll talk a little bit more about that, with 8 schools where we're learning how to leverage the Steelers, the excitement of the Steelers, to excite kids to show up to school. We also have a map of early childhood centers, thanks to help from our friends at Trying Together and the ALRC. We talk a lot about the special schools and centers, providing some data and information about our district special schools and centers. And then for the first time this year, on all of our school pages, we provide information about our English learners in schools. So that population, and making sure that they're being called out school by school. And our Justice Scholars Institute, Dr. Osai from Justice Scholars is here, but we now include on the school pages where Justice Scholars is working. So that's Westinghouse, Perry, and UPrep. The data for the number of students taking those courses and the number of kids who pass and potentially earn college credit through that passing grade, right? And so we want to make sure that we're calling out these programs. And so I know if you're out there and you're in a school and you're like, I have a great program and you're not including it, please feel free, reach out. We want to make sure that we're including these programs that are helping our kids access the credits and skills that they need to be successful in life. The other thing we include, and I have to give a big shout out to Nina Unitas and all of the whole team at the arts department, we are able to include student art every year through this report to the community. And I just want to thank all of our incredible student artists for their cover, the back cover, and then you can see on the slide here a couple other pieces of art, one of which is from Concord and is included in the Concord story. So very grateful to our student artists for their contributions to making our report that much more beautiful. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank the funders who actually are a big part of funding this work and the work that we do with schools. We couldn't do this work without them. And we're able to do deep dive work in communities like the Hilltop because of the Birmingham Foundation, communities like the North Side with Buell. We were able to host the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative with grants from Carlow University, do work with Arlington through a grant from the city of Pittsburgh. And then we have general funding from Graybull, the Pittsburgh Foundation, and Richard King Mellon to support our work generally. So it also helps in do this work. And then up in the Hill District, McCauley Ministries has been a huge partner with us. And so we don't see our funders as just providing the fuel for our ship, but also being key partners in helping us think strategically about how we can support Pittsburgh Public School students. We're also grateful to all the community partners, including TEP, for hosting us. Thank you, Josh. Thank you to the TEP team here at the Education Partnership. Without you and all of these other partners, this book wouldn't be mailed today to all of the families and to the other sites that I mentioned earlier. These sponsorships are also a way for us to inform the community about offerings. So if you're interested in signing your child up for sports camps at the Boys and Girls Club, there's a way to find that information on our page. If you want to learn more about a language, Duolingo provides a QR code. You can sign up and start taking a language today. We're just grateful to all of our partners, and I'll shout out some more of them as we go through today, because they are, as Josh said, key to our success in this work. I also have to say super thanks to our team, both the A+ Schools team and the teams at PPS and the charters. Faysha has been our author, editor, writer, den mother for 21 years in getting this thing out. And her storytelling, editing, and writing brings to life what is happening in our schools. Gita Bacholka has been managing and moving all the parts of this project, I think, for the last 8 years, and ensures that all of the data team, our writing team, and our design team have what they need to get what they want. I have to say, we are blessed to have 3 exceptional CMU Hines College grads, not a plug to CMU and the Hines College and their internship program, but Sean Caulfield, who's now running college and career readiness at the Denver Public Schools, is our data analyst. Alec Harkins, who serves at the Bureau of Labor Statistics as an analyst, does some work, and Ayanna Rockwell, who is currently finishing up her education at CMU. And these 3 data analysts make sure that everything's scrubbed and everything that you see on the page is accurate. So we're very grateful to them, Andrea Pekelnicki and the team at 232 Design, and then our team internally, Graham Mulqueen and Molly Green, who helped scrub this thing 2 to 3 times to make sure that everything was accurate. PPS, Dr. Walters, Dr. Dwyer, Ms. Jacobs, and the whole team, Andrea. We couldn't do this without your work. And Ebony, thank you so much for helping us access Ms. Kinzel-Nath and her team at Concord, and for helping us to get the storytelling done that we want. We can't, again, it's a full team effort to tell the story, the complex story of all that's happening in Pittsburgh Public Schools. So with that, I'm going to point out some challenges and bright spots in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And my hope today is to encourage you to show up for our kids, right? Right now, our children need us more than ever. Public education needs us more than ever. And so the challenges that I present are ones that we've been talking about for years in Pittsburgh Public Schools, and there's work we can do together to make something happen. Right now, one of the biggest challenges that we see facing Pittsburgh Public Schools is that there is high racial economic segregation within our school system. Nearly half of PPS, this is white students, 45%, attend 7 schools where the concentration of students facing economic disadvantages is less than 50%. In the buildings where student concentrated poverty is over 75%, 87% of the students are of color. We had 9 highly segregated schools these are schools defined by the Department of Education as having 75% or greater of any one racial subgroup, with 86% of the students in those 9 schools being economically disadvantaged. We've tried school choice as a tool for integration. It has not led to a Pittsburgh that is more just in most contexts. And so there is a better way. And I will say that the Future Ready plan that's been put forward provides a lot of answers to some of these challenges that we're facing. So what is it that's going to get our kids to come to school? Well, 90 years ago, W.E.B. Du Bois laid out a framework for what a proper education should look like for all students. And we believe this framework is a good North Star for creating schools where students feel they belong and are excited to be. He laid this out in an essay called "Does the Negro Need Separate Schools?" And I think that challenge of segregation in separate schools and quality education remains with us today. Good schools, he said, the proper education of any people includes sympathetic relationship between teacher and student. I think we all agree that a strong relationship is the foundation of a good education. Knowledge of the individual student and their history, community, and context. A learning community of social equality that helps to increase sympathy and knowledge. Good facilities, right? Just straight up a good place to be with proper equipment and the tools you need to learn. And extracurricular activities that support the child's growth. I think this framework, is as old as it is, speaks to things that folks like Big Picture Learning and others are talking about still today. Right? What we want is a quality education for children, and that quality education for children can be delivered in any context, whether it be segregated or not. The hard part is doing it well, right? And so that was his challenge in the essay, and we'll talk a little bit more about ways in which we see Pittsburgh Public Schools meeting that challenge and ways in which the structures of the district get in the way or impede its ability to meet that challenge. We agree fundamentally that the systems that we live in are designed perfectly to get the results that they do, right? Whether that system is designed with the explicit intention or as a result of multiple decisions over time, the outcomes we get are a result of what the system does. Currently, only 1/3 of Pittsburgh's families are choosing their assigned neighborhood schools. We've seen in our work supporting Perry and Arlington that families will choose their community school if they see it as offering what students, teachers, and families want. At Perry, that has meant more project-based learning in block schedule with college and high school courses. At Arlington, it has meant a more supportive culture where restorative practices have staffing support, where we're seeing parent and community engagement happening with the support of our team, and where strong partnerships with the community are leading to assets being put into the school, like a new food pantry and resource closet. This has taken additional support from our community funders and from volunteers. But with that additional support, we can bridge the gap between where we are today to where we want to be. One bright spot that we see in this data, so it's not, I think sometimes we think about enrollment decline and it's precipitous, but what we've seen is really a leveling off of enrollment decline with a 0.4% decrease in the last year. And over the past 2 years, we've seen growth, small, but growth in the number of students entering into K-5. And so PPS is currently enrolling as a result 64% of all families in Pittsburgh, right? So we have most of the market share of families in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And we think that there are offerings on hand that families are excited about and want to be a part of. The problem is right now, our current assigned neighborhood schools tend to have higher rates of student poverty, chronic absence, and for most part, they tend to be smaller schools, unable to be able to offer the full set of offerings that make a school a place where kids and teachers want to be. And that creates a problem, right? If kids are less engaged, not wanting to be there, that can create a problem of chronic absence. And the folks at Attendance Works have broken down the root causes of chronic absence into 4 main buckets. There are barriers, right? Whether that be chronic and acute illness, involvement in the legal justice system, inequitable access to needed services. So these are all, if you look at that bucket of barriers, almost all of those are outside of the school's purview of control and really not within their mission. These are community issues, our issues as a city that we need to be taking care of. There are issues of aversion, right? Whether a child is struggling academically, they're having issues with their peers, they have undiagnosed disability or disability accommodations, those can be school-related issues to take care of. There's disengagement, right? And whether that disengagement is the student's issue because of issues with family or because of a lack of challenging, culturally responsive curriculum, we know that disengagement, especially at the high school level, when we work with families, is a big part of why we see higher rates of chronic absenteeism as kids get older. And then there's just misconceptions, right? I think our families, and this is part of why we've engaged with Everyday Labs and are proud to support and partner with PPS to deliver it, is folks think that their kids are missing less time than they actually miss. Parents actually underestimate by half the number of days that their child has missed. And so by providing nudge letters and ongoing communication about where their child is, we hope to reduce those misconceptions. There's also the conception, because of our truancy laws, that excused absences are somehow okay. And certainly, if you have sickness, if something's going on, please sign the letter, make sure your absence gets excused. But the reality is, if you miss more than 10% of the days in a school year, your child is much more likely to be behind. And so we want to make sure families understand that, regardless of whether it was excused or unexcused, missing any day puts your child at greater risk for falling behind. And so our schools need them there. We want you there. They're important to our mission. And so if there's anything that A+ schools can do to support you in getting your family to school, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have a great family team that's connected to a whole lot of resources in this community. And so is your school's social worker. And so is your school's counselor, right? So make sure you're reaching out and using those resources if you're struggling. But one of the things we know is when you serve high concentrations of students living in poverty, the issues of poverty, whether it's access to transportation, whether it's needing to be on a shift job and so you have to drop your child off early and there's not adequate childcare, whether there's food or clothing that you need, or your housing's unstable and you end up needing to move around, we know that drives chronic absenteeism as well. And so where we see schools with high concentrated levels of student poverty, we also see high levels of chronic absenteeism. And what we see is the average chronic absence increases as concentration of economically disadvantaged students increases, right? So in our schools where the concentrations of student poverty are 0 to 50%, 0 to 49%, chronic absence rate of 18%. In our schools where it's 75% or higher, it's 2.6 times higher at 47%. Right. And so we know that creates challenges for our school staffs to be able to move the needle on academic growth, to be able to move the needle on social and emotional growth. And so to work together to get more of our students to show up in our high need schools is a challenge that we have taken on as an organization. And so many other organizations in the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative have joined us to try and say, how do we, across our different areas of expertise, address the challenges, because there are many, that are keeping kids from getting to school, because we know when children are in school, they can take advantage of all of the opportunities that are being put in before them. And it's important not just for that reason, right? Not just to be able to be there, but if you're chronically absent in kindergarten and first grade, one study showed you're 4 times more likely to not read at grade level by 3rd grade if you're chronically absent in those 2 grades. You're 7 times more likely to drop out, according to another study, if your child is chronically absent any year between 8th and 12th grade, right? So we want to make sure our children are there, but the more you fall behind, the more you don't want to go. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting kids and getting there. And what we see in Pittsburgh Public School data is that attendance is highly correlated with students earning a college-ready GPA of 2.8. Right, so this is the Superintendent's Association's redefining ready benchmark for grade point average. And it continues to be highly correlated. In fact, this year it's more highly correlated than in past years with chronic absenteeism. So if you're a high school student right now, the one thing I can tell you, if you want to get your grades up, show up more. Like, easiest way to start getting your grades up. Your teachers will be there. There are programs of support. We can get you there. Because we know that leads then to challenges in our regional economic mobility. Every year I've been putting the slide together to talk about how do our students do from freshman year through college and completion, right? And we know that the students that graduated in 2019 faced an exceptionally extreme set of circumstances in trying to learn and get to and through college. But what we see is that out of 1,680 students that started high school in 2015, by 2025, 390 or 23% had completed college or trade school. That's up about 2% from last year. But still, when we think about the number of children who either started but didn't complete college or didn't go at all, what we know is that means that their economic prospects are less, right? And again, that's not completely on our K-12 system. Our K-12 system certainly plays a role in laying that foundation, but it's on us as a community to make sure that those children don't slip through the cracks. I see Lance Harrell from Master Builders Association. We talk often about the opportunities that exist for students in the building trades, but they have to know math and they have to be literate. And so we have to make sure that they're prepared to be able to do those jobs that exist in our community, because we don't want our children missing out on their promise. I want to, though, point out another bright spot. PPS is improving attendance faster than its peer cities. When we look at data from 8 other peer cities, we did this a few years ago, leveraging Pittsburgh Quarterly's benchmark cities, and we couldn't do, I think they have like 30 in their benchmark group. We chose 8 that we felt were most similar to PPS. And what we see is much lower rates of high chronic absence immediately after the pandemic. While ours was high, many cities had much higher. And what we see is a faster return to the rates of chronic absence before the pandemic. Are we back to where we were? Are we back to where we want to be? No. But this data, this is from last year because this year's data isn't quite ready. But what we see is a trend of moving back faster and getting more kids in school. And that's thanks to the leadership of this district, thanks to the engagement of many families. I think thanks in part to all the efforts that we're making to raise this issue of chronic absenteeism, missing just 2 days a month, 10% of the school year, and the impact it has on learning. And together, we know we're getting kids to school. Over 2,400 more kids attended school regularly in 24-25 than did in 21-22. And yes, we had a small increase last year of about 500 more students, 460 more students. But that 2 percentage point increase in chronic absenteeism is concerning, we've doubled down with expanded school partnerships, thanks to the Steelers Stay in the Game Network and data from Everyday Labs. We're now providing at A+ schools support for 9 schools to help reduce chronic absenteeism. And the data so far this year, so this is data from last week that Graham pulled. Pittsburgh Public Schools year to date chronic absence rate is about 4 percentage points lower than it was last year. At Arlington, it's 14 percentage points lower. At Faison, it's 3. Grandview, it's 5. Miller, it's actually Miller's the only one that's up a little bit, unfortunately, but that's, I mean, again, we're looking at the full day. Lions, it's down 4. Oh no, Miller's down 11. I'm sorry, I mixed that up. Miller's down 11, Morrow's down, Perry's down. I mean, we are seeing across the board when we partner up and we work with teachers and staff and when we communicate about this issue, that we're able to reduce. The last one I wanted to say, I really got to give a shout out to Westinghouse, 17-point reduction so far this year compared to last year in chronic absenteeism. And that's the work of the entire staff there. So again, we know that this isn't an easy problem to solve. We know that there are lots of factors to it, but we also know that if we pay attention to it and work together, we can get stuff done. The other thing we know is that our resources that we have, and we have ample resources in Pittsburgh Public Schools, but they're stretched too thin across too many buildings. If I look at average per pupil spending, most of our schools are in a range between a little bit under $32,500 and a little bit over $33,500. So most of our schools are in a range of about $1,000, regardless of the concentration of need in a building, right? And that's what this slide shows, is that whether it's, the number of students that are in those buildings between 25 and 59% or 80 to 95%, we have 15 schools in that range. And higher rates of students with IEPs in those schools, the spending is more equal than equitable. And that in large part is driven by the number of buildings we have. So if you have a set of base costs you have to provide, that eats up what you're able to do in terms of providing extras for schools with extra need, right? And so when we look at the Future Ready plan and we look at what it's trying to do, it's trying to say, look, if we really want to get kids with our greatest needs more resources, then we have to think about how we get more people, which are our greatest resource, under one roof, so that we're not spreading them too thin, ensuring that we have more supports for kids that need them. And those supports are, the resources are not just it's not just dollars and paper and pens, which thankfully, Josh can help with, and TP can help with, but it's also the paraprofessionals, the special education educator, the English language development educator, our counselors and social workers. These are the resources in our district, and these are the resources we know our students need. The other challenge that our school system is facing is the pool of available educators has decreased significantly since 2012. In 2012, there were over 25,700 people who got their certifications that came to teach in Pennsylvania. Most of those certifications were earned here in Pennsylvania, some were earned out of state. In 22-23, a good note is that it's up a little bit from the prior year. Over 1,400 more people got their Instructional One certification in 22-23, but it's still only 7,500 folks. So where PPS was able to just 10, 15 years ago rely on a pool of close to 25,000 people that the whole state was going after to ensure that it had continuity in its teaching staff and core, we only have 7,500 folks to go from now across 500 districts. And so that's a challenge for this district, and it becomes a challenge for providing substitutes, both building substitutes on a permanent level and substitutes on a daily basis. And I would encourage anyone listening who's a community partner, who's thought about education as a pathway to become a substitute. Come join the district and show up to help our kids show up every day. Because I know in buildings where we can't get a substitute, our teaching staff has to then cover for those classrooms, and that creates stress and morale issues. And so we want more folks coming in that want to teach, that have the right certifications, come in and being part of our schools, right? So this slide just speaks to that point. One bright spot that PPS had and has had and continues to have is that it attracts a more diverse teaching pool than most districts across the state. Pittsburgh, in fact, has twice the number of teachers of color, as does our state on average. And we have hundreds of districts without a teacher of color at all. So students who are of color in those districts never experience a teacher of color at all. So PPS is a place where, for many of our students, they see their identity reflected in those who teach for them. And this is important, right? Because some research shows that differences in teacher and student backgrounds can also lead to disparities in suspension rates and discipline. While student suspensions rose slightly by 1 percentage point over last year, with 84% of students being suspended being economically disadvantaged, these racial disparities are still problematic even in PPS, where this has been a focus for multiple years. We see that Black students were six times as many Black students as white students were suspended in the past year. And we know that the causes of suspension are multiple, right? There are student needs that are unaddressed. There are biases that are being unaddressed. There are supports that staff need that they don't have to address. And there's not just one factor that drives these differences and discrepancies. We should be looking at those root causes to understand how to reduce them. Our work supporting Arlington's student support team has led to a reduction in fights this year from 57 last year to 2 a couple of weeks ago. Addressing the root causes what leads to this type of conflict that lead to suspensions has meant that Arlington is on track to half its suspension rate this year compared to last year. So it's doable. It takes work, it takes support staff to do. Arlington has a project manager who was trained by the Just Discipline Project out of the University of Pittsburgh in restorative practices and is able to do restorative circles in a way that provides teachers with a place for kids to go. And so that structure is working well there for them. They still have a long way to go, but we're happy to be able to support their efforts in trying to reduce suspension and fights at the school. Because we know safe schools are schools where kids want to be. Schools where they're not getting suspended or schools where they want to be. And suspensions, just in case you don't know, suspensions do count toward chronic absenteeism, right? And so whether you're in school when you're not in school for any reason, it's important. The other huge challenge that the district faces, and it was talked about a lot in the Future Ready plan, is access to opportunities. Right, our current gifted system overly identifies socioeconomically homogeneous group of kids, right? And so we would think that the distribution of gifted identification would be kind of across the board, almost equal. But what we see is in schools where we have less disadvantaged students, higher rates of gifted identification. And because of that, the number of low-income students identified as gifted decreased this year from 26% to 22%. Now, the Future Ready Plan spoke specifically to this, and it was trying to do two things, and I think these things still need to happen. One, push those services out to the building level, making sure that our students have gifted services in the building, and changing the screener to a verbal screener that would allow for more students to express their gifts, whether they have attained certain levels of literacy or not, right? 75% of students with a gifted IEP attend 8 schools, right? So it is a set of resources, of supports that we're providing students that at places like Dilworth and Grandview, more students get to experience because they're being provided at the school base. We think that's an important thing to do across the board, because those types of project-based learning supports help create a richer learning environment for kids. The other opportunity that we've talked about year over year and continue to talk about is Algebra 1 being offered in a middle school. There were 390 students last year that maybe could have taken Algebra 1, but for the fact that their school didn't provide it. It's 400 kids, almost 400 kids that didn't have the opportunity to take a course that we know opens up higher level math, engineering, and the types of science, lab science, when they have that course under their belt by 8th grade. If 23% of these students were eligible, because that's the rate district-wide of the number of 8th graders taking algebra was 23%, that'd be about 100 more kids that would have taken algebra, but for the fact that it wasn't in their school. Consolidating middle schools to a 6th to 8th grade band and putting more kids under one roof makes a ton of sense if we want to make sure our kids have access to opportunities. You know, our smaller high schools also face challenges of being able to offer as many AP courses, right? This slide is from last year, was created in the run-up to the creation of the plan. And they just aren't able to offer as many of those opportunities. And with less AP courses in schools that are predominantly Black and low income, is it then any wonder that we see these disparities in AP course taking between Black and white students? We know providing the right support to a child at the right time is a way to make sure every kid is successful in school. A few years back, we put together this academic roadmap. It is used by our parent engagement team almost every day to talk about the milestones that families should be paying attention to on their road to academic success. And you can pick one up at ourschools.pittsburgh.org, and we're always happy to share it. But what we know is you got to start strong. That means attending pre-K, means striving for a 95% or better attendance rate, and learning to read in those early years. It means that you're monitoring progress. So if you're a family and you're seeing that your child in 3rd grade hasn't been didn't meet state standards in proficiency, you're going to ask the question about where can I get more help? Where can I get more support? It means monitoring progress in grades 3 to 8, right? You're going to get tutoring support if you need there. And take algebra by 8th grade if you can, because we know that leads to more classes being open to you in high school. And then plan for the future, right? Again, we know that a 2.8 grade point average or higher and 95% or better attendance means that you're much more likely to go to and succeed in college or trade school. So whether your pathway is college, career to college, or trade school, these two things, the 2.8 GPA and 95 or better attendance, is almost a guarantee for you to be successful. We want you to take those rigorous courses, explore career, and moving forward. And look, we've seen significant reductions in chronic absenteeism this past year, even with some increases across the board. Pittsburgh Liberty reduced by 27%, Southbrook by 20%, Minadeo by 11%. And City Charter High, with its 4-day-a-week schedule, year-round schedule, has the lowest chronic absenteeism of any public high school in Pittsburgh, and looping among staff has the lowest chronic absenteeism of any high school in Pittsburgh at 6%. So something to explore there, I think, for all of our schools as we think about high school reform, is what's being done there and how might we learn some lessons that can help our kids stay engaged in high school at the high school level. Schools that moved more of their students from intensive to strategic or core. So DIBELS is a measure of early literacy skills, and it's used as a diagnostic tool to support teachers in their instruction in kindergarten. And what we see is a good movement every year of kids who are coming in who don't have necessarily the skills at the beginning of the year to be literate, by the end of the year due. We saw at Banksville, Concord, Liberty, Linden, Phillips, and Colfax, the sort of highest movement of kindergartners to that from intensive or strategic to core. And that's so important for our students to get off to a strong start in literacy. Instruction, though, I mean, overall, though, again, the story, I'm going to keep telling the story of chronic absence because it's there. Instruction, socioeconomic status, chronic absence, and English language all are interplaying, English language development, all interplaying in terms of the role we see in student achievement, right? These are all factors that impact student achievement. We see at a school like Banksville that has less than 20 of its, we see a school like Banksville that actually has pretty good chronic absence numbers with less than 20% of its students chronically absent, but has 70% English language development learners. It's struggling in its PSSA scores in ELA, right? And so knowing that there needs to be more English language development support, again, something that the Future Ready Plan speaks to, right? About making sure that we have more developmental English language development teachers in our schools. What we also see is that Allegheny, Dilworth, Montessori, all magnets with lower rates of concentrated student poverty and lower chronic absence rates have higher rates of student achievement. Colfax and Greenfield, which are neighborhood K-8s, again, with lower rates of concentrated student poverty and chronic absence, less than 20%, also have higher rates of student achievement. So not surprising, but how do we create a system where we are able to support students across the board in ensuring that they get to school? You know, the data is pretty clear. When we looked at, we compared 2021 data to 2024-25 data, and we saw that for the most part, things were similar and the same across the board for many of our subgroups, except for our Hispanic, Asian, and Black students saw a drop off. We see that there's a clear need, especially for our Hispanic and Asian students who are English language development students, for more of those supports, right, to support them. Statewide, 49% of third grade students compared to 44% of PPS third graders scored proficient or advanced on the PSSA. Pre-pandemic, 51% of PPS third graders scored proficient or advanced. Right, so we know there's still work to do, and we know that a big part of that story is making sure our students go to school. I promised I'd talk about it earlier, but I'm just so proud of the work that the team at Concord is doing to create an integrated school where a growing immigrant and refugee student population is being celebrated, welcomed into the school with great results for all students. You can see just 4 years, the number of students that Concord serves that are English language development students has almost doubled. And that's the same case for the entire district, right? It is the growth in our English language development learners, our immigrant and refugee students, that is a big part of the story as to why our enrollment decline has not gone more precipitously in the past few years. We see that all subgroups at Concord are exceeding district averages in third grade reading. The school has a capture rate. I think it's the highest in the city. I have to double check this, but at 61%. It's one of the highest, if not the highest, in the district in terms of the number of students who live in the neighborhoods surrounding the school that are going to the school. It's a well-integrated school. It's one of the schools when you look at its enrollment pie chart, it is one of the most colorful pie charts on the school pages. And it's managing to support a population of about a quarter of the school that's English language learners with attentive teachers, technology, and staff. I'm not going to steal any thunder from Ms. Kinzel-Nath, the principal who's here today with us, but I just want to recognize the work her and her team are doing to create a school where all families and children are welcome. And again, no English language learner is alike. They come with different backgrounds in education, some with formal schooling, some with never cracked a book and have been living in refugee camps their whole lives, right? And so this team is able very quickly to assess and support the students that come in, and we're just so grateful for the work they're doing and for opening up your school to us to see. We also know that English language learners, by the research, support and improve native-born learning, right? And there's a couple of theories as to why, but one of the ones is that by having to serve students in a more universally designed way, it actually improves instruction for all students, right? And so we see in a couple of studies and provide information there. The other thing that the district is doing is starting to recognize that biliteracy, multiliteracy, and being able to speak multiple languages is something to celebrate and is actually a very marketable and needed skill in our communities. And so the seal of biliteracy is a test that you can take and a badge you can earn that signals to employers that you are biliterate. that you're bilingual and able to speak and read in multiple languages. That's such an important thing and a growing part of what this district is trying to do in terms of an asset that kids can leave with. We are also lucky, again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about partners. There's some great community partners supporting kids, whether it's Casa San Jose, the Latino Community Center, Arise, Hello Neighbor, the Jewish Family and Community Services, or the organizations that are involved in the Collaborative for Immigrant Impact. We know that this community has stepped up to support our immigrant neighbors and is doing a lot to welcome them. So for those that are not welcoming our immigrants, we say to you, don't stop. Our community is open, welcome. We are neighbors, and we want all of our neighbors to feel welcome here in Pittsburgh. All right, so that was my rising up detour, but I'm so glad we took it. The other thing we want to talk a little bit about is like, how can we show up for the 745 fourth graders that did not meet state standards for reading last year to help them get on track? Well, we know the Carnegie Library, if you're struggling, Carnegie Library, Learning Disabilities Association, church unions, Kids-Celebrate in the North Side, and others are working to support our students out of school as teachers are staying late and tutoring students in school. But what else can we do to show up for those learners so that they are reading at grade level in the coming year? Math achievement for Pittsburgh and for the state continues to be something that lags behind reading achievement. Like reading achievement, those schools with lower rates of chronic absence have higher rates of math achievement. Again, Greenfield, we've talked about it in a past Rising Up story, but continues to have really high third grade math achievement at 85% of their third graders in 2025 scoring proficient or advanced in math. Instruction and students' socioeconomic background also play a role here, as well as chronic absenteeism. How do we help unlock middle school math and open up the doors to STEAM and STEM careers, right? The Future Ready Plan's approach to creating larger middle schools means that we can double down on learning approaches to get our students to be able to grow in math, catch up, and get all students doing better. As you can see, compared to the state, we're behind for where we want to be, and compared to where we were in 2019 before the pandemic, a little bit behind. Right, but we have seen improvements across the board in math in ways that we haven't seen as much in literacy. Again, part of the reason for the disparities that we see across subgroups is due to higher rates of chronic absenteeism. I promise you, we're getting to the number of PPS seniors that earned a GPA of 2.8 or higher or below. Again, also. We see chronic absence and racial economic segregation are driving some of these discrepancies in student achievement. In 24-25, again, I've shown this slide before, attendance and earning a college-ready GPA were so highly correlated. And so we know that we've got to do a better job of getting our kids to school, especially in our schools where there are high needs students. 44 more students this year on a bright spot. 44 more students this year scored a 3 or higher on an AP than did last year, with more students taking the AP exam this year overall than last year, which led to a 7-point increase in AP exam passing for those that took the test. Overall, the percentage meeting SAT reading benchmarks went up 1 percentage point, with the largest gain at Brashear, where they saw a gain of 10 percentage points in terms of the number of students that are meeting the SAT benchmark. In math, overall results remained the same, with Brashear also seeing improvement by 7 percentage points, and Westinghouse seeing improvement of 5 percentage points. Imagine the gains that we could have if we had more students there regularly. One other note, we see a huge discrepancy between the number of Black students that take an AP course and then to go on to take an exam and earn college credit compared to white students and multi-ethnic students. And our hope is that the district can use this data to drive more supports out to Black and Brown students to say, hey, the test at the end will earn you college credit. What's the barrier? What's the impediment? How do we support you to be able to take the test so you can earn the credit? Because those disparities are stark. Justice Scholars Institute, so if you don't take an AP course, you don't have a lot of AP courses in your school, which at Westinghouse, UPrep and Perry, they don't. You can take a Justice Scholars Institute course. In many of the schools, there's between 3 and 4 course offerings, and students are able to earn college credit from Pitt, depending on their score, et cetera. 36% of Perry's 11th graders 11th and 12th graders were enrolled in a JSI course last year. 17% of Westinghouse's 11th and 12th graders were in JSI, with over 80% of the students that enrolled in that course because of the support of the teachers and the University of Pittsburgh staff that are working on this, able to earn college earning credit and pass the course, right? And so it's such an important thing. More importantly, though, it gave students the confidence that they can take and succeed in a college course. And that to me is a huge thing. The other thing we've seen is a large increase in the number of students who graduated on time year over year. Overall, we're at 87%. The Black graduation rate at 85% is 4 percentage points higher than the state graduation rate for Black students. So on the graduation rate side, while we still have some struggles on the academic achievement side, we're seeing more and more of our students graduate, right? Now what we got to do is make sure they're there all the time so they can take full advantage of that education. I'm going to talk just briefly about the work we believe we can do together to get every child to school every day and succeeding. And we're just so grateful to a board that has agreed to a big shift in our mission. We were started as a watchdog with a focus on governance. And since the pandemic, we have shifted to really trying to drive school supports out to our schools. We don't always do it successfully, but we do our best to try. And our vision really is a Pittsburgh where every kid succeeds in every school every day. And our mission, we want every community to be a place where kids can get to school safely and on time. Every family having what they need so kids can come to school ready to learn. Every school a place where students feel they belong and are excited to be. One shout out I want to give on the picture on the slide, you can see our friends at Manchester Craftsmen's Guild Youth, MCG Youth, are a constant partner in our work. This is a screen printing activity they did to put Ron Clark Academy's house system onto t-shirts and sweatshirts for middle school students to encourage them to show up the Monday before Election Day. Right, we know that Monday before Election Day, often a time where especially our middle school students might not come. So we wanted to do something that engaged them, and we did. So we do this through a variety of ways, and I'm not going to go into them here. We'll talk about it now. But we do this through Show Up School partnerships. Like I mentioned, we have 9 schools where we're partnering at different levels. I need to shout out, though, this is a picture of the food pantry and resource room that was just opened at Arlington. Danielle Gill and all of the community schools coordinators and agencies that help get resources into schools, you're doing great work. Mary Queen of Peace Church and Megan Larson Reedy helped us raise money and coordinate work so that our kids had what they need and make sure that the food bank was able to deliver food. I have to give big thanks to the City Councilman Bob Charlin and general council staffer Leanne Wilson, along with the rest of his office for just providing support to Arlington throughout the year, and those led to partnerships with Thermo Fisher Scientific, People's Natural Gas, Dick's Sporting Goods, and more. Again, together, this community has the resources that it needs to be able to support kids, and we just need to put them together, right? A big shout out to Tiffany and Nicole and Brianna on our team too for all the work they're doing in the school on a regular basis, and Graham for providing data support so that we can support them. The other thing, we launched the Stay in the Game Network. This is exciting. This is the first team outside of the state of Ohio to sign on to the Stay in the Game Network. We think there will be more across the country. And we're piloting with our folks at PPS and Don Golden, who runs student supports, with Nicole Bauer and the folks at the Steelers, and with folks at Patel for Kids in Ohio, who are teaching us what they did to use their sports teams to make sure kids are showing up to school. To pilot this in 8 schools that had chronic absentee rates of 40% or higher last year. Our community funders are super generous, has led to what we call our A to Z funds. And these allow us to put dollars where needs are, right? So when the school says we have a need, or we want to do an attendance incentive, or there's a field trip we would love to do, but we can't ask parents to pay for, we're able to reach out to community partners and fund those things. And that allows schools to do amazing things. We're just very grateful for all of the support that our community foundations, our funders, and others have put into our schools, because it's because of them that our kids are getting a more richer community experience. Just go back. I also want to thank both the current mayor's office and the future mayor's office for being such supporters. Mayor Gainey was able to, because of interactions with our offices and with the schools, make sure that streets were plowed on time, built new sidewalks around our schools, that made it safer to walk to school. It was really focused on ensuring student safety with the safe passages work that's been going on with the district. And Mayor O'Connor, we're hopeful, joined us in our back to school door knocking. We are hopeful that he will join us in our school supports going forward. Our family engagement team, Nicole Sims, Brianna Davis was online. They've met with over 300 families one-on-one this year so far, and it helped create PTOs at Miller, Arlington, and Morrow. They're doing amazing work to stand up both structures that create true partnership between schools and engagement. Again, schools are doing this on their own all the time, right? But what Nicole and the team do is just add an extra set of hands, and we know that that makes a difference. Finally, everyday labs, evidence-based communications are getting over 17,000 families, over 171,000 text messages, and 22,000 pieces of mail to try and encourage kids to get to school. We know that matters. And the Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative, 132 organizations continue to meet on a monthly basis, whether through lunch and learns or meetings, trying to understand what we all can do to address this issue. In the essay that I referenced earlier from 1935, Du Bois wrote, "Theoretically, the Negro needs neither segregated schools nor mixed schools. What he needs is education. What he must remember is that there is no magic, either in mixed schools or in segregated schools. The work we have before us is to ensure that all schools offer kids a place where they can thrive." I hope that today's presentation provided you with some food for thought about how we might do that, about the challenges that we still face, and about what we need to do next. I'd like now to bring up Jamie Kinzel-Nath, Principal of Concord, to share a little bit more about her school, which I don't think I did justice in my presentation on, but we were so grateful to have her.
Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, I am the proud principal of Pittsburgh Concord. I want to thank A+ Schools for this opportunity. It was really a rich experience walking through how we go about our business with the staff members of A+. As he mentioned earlier, our pie chart is quite colorful. And so we, every day, we support students from over 22 countries, speaking 11 different languages, with all types of abilities and learning needs. And when you have that type of diversity in a school, you do not just arrive at a belief that they're our students. It doesn't come automatically. You have to have a continuous growth system, and you have to build systems around it to support it. Because when we genuinely mean they're our students, when every adult believes that and acts on it, then every child can thrive. That's what I'd like to share with you today. When kids feel welcomed, safe, and seen, they engage and they learn. Our English learner population has grown significantly over the years. Some arrive with some learning experiences, others have never been in school. But everyone does arrive ready to learn if we create the right conditions. One day, on day one, we have multilingual paraeducators who will meet with families and help them navigate the basics. How do we get to school? Where do we enter? Where's the breakfast line? All of that matters. We pair newcomers with pairs who speak their language. Teachers use visual supports, sentence starters, and manipulatives, strategies that help English learners, but actually benefit everyone. We go beyond the academics. We've just recently installed a washer and a dryer and built a Concord closet. We foster many community partnerships and support our families because we know that a child worried about basic needs simply can't focus on the learning. We've been beginning to see some of the student results across a variety of data points. He mentioned some of those earlier. That's what happens when caring for every child becomes your culture. So how do we grow into this belief? Our general educators, our English language development specialists and special education teachers, they work as equal partners. Every week, teams meet to problem solve. One teacher may say, hey, these kids are gonna need a little vocabulary support to enter the lesson. Another one says, let's build that into our intervention clinic time. Another teacher will say, hey, let's make these materials available to everyone so that they can access the lesson. Our teachers lead small groups, pre-teaching vocabulary and with English learners so that when they return to the main lesson, they can access grade level content with their peers. That's shared ownership, and it matters. Last May, a student from Syria joined a 4th grade classroom. She had only been in the country for a week. Her teacher drew 6 rectangles. He's with us today. He had her cover them with blocks, and he celebrated her when she succeeded. Same grade level content, just a little bit of a modified entry point. And when she walked into our gym and she saw the Syrian flag along with 21 others, we certainly hope that she felt that she belonged. I've watched teachers transform. Early on, it's a daunting task, fearful, big classes, limited English, new curricular resources, but through working together, they've grown into this belief. They've discovered that these students come with knowledge, initiative, and a desire to learn. That shift from how are we going to make this work to these are our students, that's making things possible. When adults work together to support diverse learners, everybody benefits. Research shows native-born students with greater exposure to English learners score higher on tests because we know that supported and guided instruction helps everyone learn. One parent mentioned, she says, of course everybody is different and they may come from someplace else, but there's an openness. It's something that we hope that we're providing and giving to every child. What we're building at Concord, we feel is quite replicable. You have to build a culture where you grow into the belief that they're our students. You have to build systems of co-planning and co-teaching and co-owning success. We must protect collaborative time, and we must make sure that it's non-negotiable. All educators at the table, highly engaged, a shared responsibility. We partner with organizations. We can't do this work alone. We celebrate culture. Your language and your culture are valued here. Last spring, a 4th grader from Congo stood up to explain his math solution. It took time. He struggled. And when he finished, his classmates erupted with applause. That happens when adults grow into this belief together. When we say they're our students, every child, every language, every ability, and work every day to mean it. That's the work. The challenge is real, it's complex, but we remain committed to doing it every day. Thank you.
Now, before I bring up Dr. Walters, I just wanted to take a moment and provide a note on courage. I know how hard you've worked to rally this community to do an exceptionally difficult thing over the past 2 years, to change the systemic structure of a district that is leading predictably to outcomes that none of us are happy with. Like Roosevelt's man in the arena, you recognize that it is in striving valiantly, making effort even in the face of shortcomings and errors, you're spending yourself in a worthy cause for our kids. And with our community's help and the leadership and support of the newly seated board, in the end, you will find triumph of high achievement. I thank you, and I know our community thanks you for your leadership and for your dedication to transformational change for our students. And I'd like to welcome you up to provide with some reflections on this year's data. Great.
Good morning. Before I begin, I want to thank A+ Schools for another year of thoughtful, independent analysis, and for your partnership in advancing equity and opportunity across Pittsburgh. I also want to recognize Executive Director James Fogarty for advancing a renewed vision for A+ schools, one that strengthens the organization's longstanding commitment to serving students, families, and schools as authentic partners in this work. I also want to give a shout out to, with a bit of bias, because it's a former parent of mine, Faith Shantz. Just a few years ago, I'm telling a fib here, but it's been a while. It was at Frick International Studies Academy. She was one of my parents, but your storytelling, it's soothing, it's accessible. On a day like this, it just gives you the fireplace hot cocoa mood. And I talked to James about this. I said, every time I read her stories, it just sucks you in. So I do want to celebrate and acknowledge you publicly, not only as a former parent, but for your skilled artistry in storytelling and really bringing people in. The 2025 report to the community makes clear that while we're making progress, we continue to face systemic challenges that limit opportunity for too many students. We see persistent racial and economic segregation, uneven access to enrichment and advanced coursework, and the ongoing impact of small, under-enrolled schools on academic programming. But the report also highlights bright spots. We should celebrate reductions in chronic absenteeism, growth in advanced placement participation for African American students, and strong early literacy gains. One example in the report deserves special recognition, and you just heard from the esteemed and highly capable Principal Kinzel-Nath at Pittsburgh Concord, where educators are meeting the needs of our growing multilingual population through intentional supports and targeted instruction. You heard us speak about the value of culture, creating spaces of culture. You also heard us speak about the importance of systems in creating the organization. And you also heard about the value of high quality instruction and being intentional about that. And so I celebrate her, I celebrate her work, but this is the type of work that we want to scale across our district. The report also confirms something critically important, that charter schools are not outperforming Pittsburgh public schools. Despite enrolling a smaller share of students with disabilities, English learners, and students with the greatest needs. Our work is not finished, but our public schools remain the strongest vehicle for equitable opportunity in Pittsburgh. Let me turn to the board's recent decision not to advance the Future Ready facilities plan. I respect the board, and I will always work at its direction. But we must be candid about what this means for our students. The A+ schools report shows that many of our schools are too small to offer the full range of academic opportunities, algebra, world languages, arts, enrichment that our children deserve. 21 schools have fewer than 250 students, and fixed costs in an under-enrolled system drive inequities in spending and access. Without structural changes, these conditions will persist, and our long-term deficit will continue to grow. We were preparing to present the district's first balanced budget in many years. We looked back and we tracked our data. I think the last budget book we found was 1997. And at that point, there was never a balanced budget submitted. But without the efficiencies and footprint adjustments outlined in the Future Ready plan, we will now present a budget with an increased deficit. That is the reality. This is not simply a financial issue. It is an academic one. Dollars that remain tied up in underutilized buildings are dollars not going to academic supports, counselors, social workers, world language teachers, academic coaches, and enrichment programming. The Future Ready plan directly addresses these challenges, and yes, as the largest population we serve, more African American students would have been directly affected by school closures. But even more African American students would have gained access to the high-quality learning environments they deserve, environments that have often been denied. This plan expands opportunities. It does not eliminate them. It aligns directly with the A+ schools' equity gaps that have been highlighted and have been documented for years. As the most comprehensive facilities plan this district has seen in decades, it requires shared responsibility across the entire city, including communities that have historically remained untouched in previous rounds of restructuring. And that brings me to the power of partnership in addressing these challenges highlighted in this report. Our chronic absenteeism work with Everyday Labs, our partnership with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the efforts of schools that posted double-digit improvements like Liberty, Southbrook, and Minnedale demonstrate what is possible when we come together on behalf of our students. These successes show that real, lasting improvement happens when the entire community rallies around our schools. I want to take a moment to do something a bit untraditional. Last year, I launched the Superintendent's Challenge Coin to share my highest level of appreciation for the leadership, service, and the dedication that strengthen the Pittsburgh Public Schools every day. James Fogarty, if you join me. So I'm honored today to present you with the Superintendent's Challenge Coin to share my highest level of appreciation for the leadership, service, and the dedication that strengthen the Pittsburgh Public Schools every day. Your commitment to advancing equitable outcomes for Pittsburgh's children, your passion, your clarity of purpose, and your laser focus on ensuring students show up every day are qualities that make a profound difference. And there's no better moment to acknowledge your leadership than now, as A+ Schools continues to deliver timely, transparent analysis that helps guide our collective work. And these successes also show what is possible when we act with unity and urgency. And to continue this kind of progress, we need people. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And the administration, at this point, we need clarity from the board on next steps, but we also need authentic partnership from our community on the conditions required to revisit the Future Ready Plan and move it forward in service of our students. My commitment remains unchanged to build a school system grounded in equity, excellence, efficiency, and access for every child in every neighborhood. And I'm grateful to A+ Schools, to James, and to our many partners across Pittsburgh who share that commitment and are helping us build the capacity to serve students and families in stronger, more effective ways. Our students need action, and I believe Pittsburgh will rise to meet this demand. So I thank you for the time and the opportunity to share my reflections.
I'd like now to welcome up Billy Hileman, who represents the educators of our district, without whom this work doesn't get done, right? And so, Billy, would you please come join me and give us some thoughts about this year's report on behalf of our district's teachers? Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Billy Hileman, president of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, Local 400. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm so grateful that I'm asked to speak. Sometimes I wonder if after I say something, whether it'll be the last time I've been invited, but this may be no different. I'm not sure. But without making too much fun of it, I am grateful that A+ Schools does this effort each year and compiles a broad set of data that are available, but does so in a way that makes it accessible. But I do also have to say that, when I read it, and by the way, if this is on both the reader as well as the writer in terms of what the mind is doing. because I read, I've read, the first part of the section. I haven't gone through all the pages of each school. But I read the article about Concord, which was truly a remarkable presentation, and congratulations to Jamie Kinzel-Nath for the work that she's doing, and the teachers and other staff at her school that are doing to make that school successful. I appreciated very much that section. I also appreciate, the executive summary and all the details. But I think that as I read it, sometimes I have different reactions to what is being presented, and I start to argue a little bit, and so that happens. That happens with me also. But you pointed out some of those arguments in your presentation when you provide some of the context that isn't in the presentation. So there is, with all these data, there's context that that impacts how the data appear. For example, we look at the number of graduates in education in Pennsylvania and the decline in it, and we also look at the percentage of educators of color in the state as well as in our school. But we don't have the data. I didn't see the data. Maybe it's there and I missed it. The data of what percentage of the graduates of those 7,000 or so graduates were people of color who graduated with an education degree. And one thing that has been a trend, I don't know if in the last couple of years it's continued, that the number of people of color that are going into education is declining. And the opportunity to hire them when they're not there is, that changes that too. So the context around that is important. And if you point that out, it is not an argument in any way that is trying to argue with the importance of educators of color in our schools, in all our schools. And I'm glad that this report did make the comment. I think it's the first time I saw it, but maybe it's only because it's the first time. Maybe it's not just because, maybe it's not the first time it was there, that all children benefit from teachers of color and other staff of color in the schools. There's no doubt about that. If white kids are only seeing white teachers, only having that experience, that's going to have an effect. And I'm not making any suggestion about the character or value system of a white teacher in that. It's just, well, you know what I'm talking about, or you would be. So, but anyway, so that's one of the things that I wanted to say, is just that there's a lot of context. And I think that this argument, I think some of the things that you presented, this report makes a very strong argument for the community school model, and investing heavily in the community school model and trying to get more traction with that model in Pittsburgh Public Schools. There's certainly aspects of it that are happening with the partnerships that you've identified, particularly around English learners, which are so important, and CASA San Jose and other organizations to have access to our schools and be a presence in our schools, also a present. That in a way, they're a gift. The other thing that I took some notes on some of these pages. I did get an electronic copy in advance, to be fair, but all it remained was electronic, and so some of my thoughts escaped. But I did have a chance to go back and remind myself while I was sitting here earlier. But I do want to say one thing about that right now, what I just said, because it's connected. The idea that our system is designed to get the outcomes that it gets. And I want to challenge that one a little bit, because I don't know that I believe that. It sounds like a good phrase. It seems like we keep getting it, but I'm not sure. I think that there are some forces that are so powerful that may be guiding that more than just how we design it, because I think there is a real concerted effort and a real deep belief in the equity, in the anti-racist, in the multiple gender affirming value system that the leadership of this school district espouses, and that many educators and other people who work in the schools hold. It's not ubiquitous. It's not ubiquitous at all, but it is. But I think that exists at a level in Pittsburgh Public Schools that is is really important, that we need to continue to grow that value system in our schools, because, you know, the idea of welcoming immigrants is probably right now, aside from learning English, because that's helpful, is probably for some other reasons, the most important work that we can do year to year right now. And as well as the other, things that we do that are equally important. I don't want to say that's the most, but you know, whenever I say that, I think, oh, well, what about that? Immediately. So let me put a bunch of asterisks on that and you can assume what they are. So I wanted to challenge that a little bit. The other thing about this, we have to be very careful with knowing the difference between, and I think your math people that put this together do it, but there's not this caution in it. That correlation is not cause and effect. You know, that when you have a correlation, you're only looking at usually two things that are related, and you get a trend line on a graph, and you, I'll say I have to be careful when I'm looking at that, not to subconsciously see it as a cause and effect, because it may not be. There may be other things that are not being measured that in that moment, that are the driver of the trend line, that we're not talking about in the moment. So I think that the strength of this report, the strengths, I'll put it plural, are the compilation of the data, making it accessible, but it's an opportunity to really explore what's going on, so that we don't take it what would be on a plain language face value, and then use that to drive our decisions, because I think there needs to be deeper conversations about what is in this report, and that is the second, what I just said is the second value and opportunity of all the work that A+ schools did for that. So I think that is extremely. I'm just going to look quickly at my notes. You can tell. Well, first of all, there's both upsides and downsides to going last. There's also I also noticed how well prepared the several prior speakers were, and what I must look like to you. But nevertheless, I can't find my notes, but maybe it's because I have my glasses in my hand. I'll finish with this, that the things that we need to, here's what I want to say, because we didn't mention the future ready plan, and I think that I agree with what Dr. Walters presented, and what he said, and the caution and warnings that he's given us about not taking some bold action at this point. And I agree that we need to. I said it in a public comment time before the board that they should vote yes. I got some boos, as a matter of fact. But, you know, it's not there's a split. There's a split on how people see it. But we are where we are right now. And so what I think that we need to do is use it as an opportunity to understand what the danger is that it was voted down, but listen to the criticisms that were presented, and without, with urgency, but not into hasty, work together to take the steps that will lead to some action that will be passable by a board to get things done. Because I'll tell you what, the people who are debating, and arguing with the elected board members know a lot of stuff. They know, our Dr. Walters and his team know the intricacies of this school district better than any elected board member ever could. And there are people who are spending a lot of time watching it that know and spend more time on things better than, more deeply, even coming from their own point of view, more so than what a board member could do. So we kind of have to work together, I think, in order to have a presentation that satisfies some of the things that were divisions in the recent thing, because we do have to take some steps. 21 schools below 250, that's not sustainable. That's harmful. That's truly harmful. And so we do have to do some things there. I've gone over my 8 minutes by, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes and 37.2 seconds or something close to that. And so I'll end it there. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Billy. And I appreciate the note to complexify our thinking. Complexify, man, where? It's 11:30. I didn't have enough coffee this morning. So what can you do next? You can get more information today at ourschoolspittsburgh.org. Like I said, these reports will be going out to libraries, to your mailbox. If you would like a paper copy, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can figure out how to get one to you. You can come by our offices in Hazelwood. We have copies there. You can share this information with your community through a presentation, whether we can do it online, to a group that you may be meeting with in person, whether it's at your school or community group. You can get involved with the PLC. Come join us. Whether you work on housing, you work on transportation, you work on food, you work on any issue that impacts children and families in our community. Pittsburgh Learning Collaborative is a place where we're leveraging chronic absence as a barometer for the measure of our success. We know that there are complex issues that drive people not being able to get to school. We know that all of us can play a role in addressing that because we know that's going to help our children learn. And then finally, how can you show up to get every kid in every school every day? Go to aplusschools.org. We had a nice little video that talks a little bit about the importance of these issues and how you can get involved. And we're just growing. We're just getting started on how you can get more deeply involved in schools, how you can donate your time, your treasure, and your passion to support our children to become what we know they're capable of in their fullest promise and potential. With that, I say thank you to all of you today for joining us, for your time, for being part of this presentation, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Appreciate all of your time.